Well, hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast, a podcast where we get together on a weekly basis and tackle the things that we thought were interesting from the world of football and or soccer. I nailed that this week. I'm Tom Rennie. Alongside me, fresh from hip surgery and looking young and resplendent, it's Dunny, Brian Dunseth. How are you, mate? You all right?
I'm struggling, Rennie. I'm trying my best. Man, technology, wild ride. Dr. Momberger hooked me up down at Tosh out here in Salt Lake City. Spectacular. But yeah, man, I'm not the young buck I once thought I was. And this was last week. Let me tell you that. In my mind, I'm 23. In my body, I'm 47. And this is taking a little bit longer than I thought it was going to take. But thankfully, it's coming along. It's coming.
You're doing okay. You're moving around well. You're moving around well. You're already walking. You're already up.
Off my crutches. Actually, right now, as we talk, I've got my entire left side iced up. Just trying to continue to calm and bring everything down in terms of the swelling and a little bit of the pain. But yeah, man, I was actually, here's the crazy part. I went in for surgery at 1:30 in the afternoon. I was home by 4. I was home by 5. I walked up my stairs on crutches. And by about 5:30, I was already doing laps around my house, walking gingerly, but I was still walking. So amazing. Yeah, it's wild, man. And I got a new mechanical hip. I'm one step closer to RoboCop, and yeah, little by little, I'm feeling better. Sorry, I appreciate you. Appreciate all the messages and the phone calls and everything. And I will let you know that I have for those out there in Radio Land listening, whether it's on Spotify, YouTube, anywhere that you are watching and or listening to us. I did gross Rennie and Horsey out. I did send a couple of pictures to show what my rump roast of a left leg looked like as it continued to expand and or turn bright red, purple, orange, yellow colors over the last week. So highly inappropriate. Thank God we have no HR. But yes, I did try to gross them out on a daily basis.
And it worked. And it was weird that you sent us the picture of your butthole as well. I don't know why you did that, but that was a...
Wrong side, Rennie.
That was terrific as well.
It was an anterior approach, not a lateral approach.
Yeah, it was weird. I didn't know you went for a colonoscopy at the same time, I assume. Yeah. It was very strange. But I did watch the full 4-hour film, and it's good to see you so squeaky clean. Before we get into the football, I want to talk about the USA-Mexico victory and the Nations League win, which you've all celebrated so wildly by moaning about your manager nonstop. Before we do that, though, just one final hip surgery question. And this is just between, us gals and the typing pool. How are the psychedelic painkillers? Are you enjoying them? Or what have you seen? Any visions?
No, so they had me on Oxycontin coming off, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it. Just absolutely destroys your stomach, makes it really difficult to go to the bathroom afterwards, and that's the numero dos. I don't like it. I don't like those type of painkillers. So off the alcohol for a week and counting. Been off Oxy since Friday night. I think I took my last 2 Oxy. But I do have a funny story for you.
Hit me.
So we were, I'm in my gown, butt naked. They actually have this new gown that they have where they hook up like this little tube of hot air to keep you warm. So you got your socks on, got nothing underneath.
The hot butt tube.
So the tube, so it's like the gown that you put on that you tie on your neck and your side, there's like a hole in the front now, and they hook up this little tube. So it's hot air that comes in and keeps you warm.
Wow.
So
things are so modern. See, we've got the National Health Service. We basically have just like a window open if you're hard yourself. Sorry, Tim. That's the way it goes. That's 15 years of Tories for you. So you had and what happened with the hot tube?
So, they start, they give me my IV. They start putting a little happy juice in there. I have to get a shot in my back to do like a pain block from my waist down, because obviously they're going to slice me up, split everything apart, dislocate my hip, put basically like a catcher's glove inside my hip, glue that, let that grow in. Then they're going to saw the hip bone off. They're going to shove this thing inside of the thigh bone itself. There's like a ceramic ball that then pops back into the hip, but then they're torquing it. The coolest part, they have a machine. This technology is wild. They have a machine that aligns me 100% perfectly. So my feet, I'm 100% equal on my feet. based on what the machine is telling where the movement is and what needs to adjust. Just absolutely crazy stuff. But as I bend over and they put the block into my spine, start this talk, and I like, it doesn't really hurt, numb. Said they put like these ski boots on. I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, we put these ski boots in, blah, blah. And they like, oh, they're sliding me over onto the bed. And all of a sudden I realize this is the part where a gown comes up. Someone's got to deal with the bits and pieces. And so like I look around, and thankfully it's all dudes. And I look around and I was like, who drew the short stick? Who's the lucky one? And they're
Was
like,
it a short
what?
stick?
I was like, what? Yeah, it was cold. It was cold at this point. And and I was like, because like I'm insecure. Everybody gets insecure. I don't care if you're working with a giant hog. At some point, like your stuff's out there, and someone's going to judge you. People's going
Rooms
to like,
get
oh my
cold,
god,
man.
look, he's blessed, or oh my god, he's super not blessed. He's unlucky. So I joke around. I was like, I look and I'm just like, so, and they're like, what? And I was like, who's going to put on my Borat mankini? And they like slide me over. And at that point, they didn't even give me the chance to like count down from like 10. And that's all I remember. All I remember is they slid me over to the table, operating table. I get like, I'm getting on the table. I'm down. They're like, you comfortable? I'm like, yeah, I'm comfortable. I look around. I was like, hey, who's going to put on the Borat man key? Out. And then all I remember is I woke up and I hear this, dun, 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 like the music that was playing. I can't remember the song, but like it was bumping loud. The music was in there and they were like rolling me out. And like that moment where you wake up from surgery, it's like a cat in your mouth. Sorry, Tim. You're like looking around, like remembering, like, oh, I did just have surgery. Best part, but I didn't even get to count down. It's like I
Oh.
was so excited for the challenge of like, okay, count from 100, like 100, like you don't even get to 99. So
I
yeah,
love that. I love
I
the
got,
idea
I got
as
my
well.
joke in.
I love the idea as well. They rolled you into basically an EDM festival to do the operation, and you
It's
roll
so
back out
wild,
again.
dude.
Strobe
The
lights
tech.
everywhere. What's going on?
Big old televisions up on the screen. Like my x-rays were up there. They had like circled the joint, like just the, like you could see everything, the computers, it was pretty wild. So shout out to Tosh, Dr. Momberger, Dr. Jared Dunn, who listens to the show, who helped me in the process of this hip surgery journey to get in to see Dr. Momberger over at
Oh,
Tosh. Jared listens to the show. Unfortunately, he's a Tottenham fan, so
oh.
doesn't know what it's like to lift a trophy, get my boom, boom, boom shots in. But yeah, it was quite the experience. But here's the other story. I get out of surgery, pain block. They're like, "How are you?" I'm like, "I'm great. I'm moving my feet, can feel my toes, doing all this stuff. Everything's great." Pain block wears off. I went from like pain management of a 2 to I was flying at 10 out of 10 pain. And my wife finally comes back and they had given me something else. And I forget what they had given me. Didn't even cut it at all. And my wife's like, "How are you?" And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, "I'm good." And tears are just flowing out of my face. And she's like, ma'am, he's hurting. He's got like a really high pain tolerance. Like, so shout out to Jade because she's like, she got me back down to like that 4 to 6 region where
Mm.
you get to be discharged. But yeah, it's a painful surgery. But I will say all of the pain that I was dealing with originally, flat out gone. So yeah, it's if for anyone out there that's dealing with, and actually had a lot of listeners and viewers of the show reach out to me on various methods, of social media or direct messaging, that said, I was thinking about this. How is it? Or I just did this. Don't wait. If you
Mm.
have this issue, technology is incredible. Do not wait. Find the best surgeon you can. It's definitely life changing.
And if you don't have the money or the insurance, Dunny's old hip is available on eBay. Just search for Old Man Hip and you will
Yeah.
find it going for $5 currently in an auction. Listen, we're going to move on to the football. Good to see you back. Good to see you well. And I look
Cheers.
forward to you having a couple of tramadol during the program. The last 5 minutes is going to be wild. Before we get to the USA, just briefly, you can now watch this entire program on Spotify. So you can watch it on YouTube. We're mainly a podcast and you get it on all your podcast platforms, this program. And we're doing very well, very happy, but tell your friends about the program. We're looking to break it to that top 30. We're hanging around top 50. We want to be top 30. So tell your friends, listen to the program, listen for enough time to, make it count. But also you can watch the program in full on Spotify as well as YouTube. And I've invested, as viewers will see right now, in a new camera. This camera is top of the effing range. There you go, Tim. You're welcome. Look at this. Watch me move. For people who are watching this on Spotify or YouTube, you get to experience this. Ready? Here we go. Over here, look. Comes with me over that side. It comes with me over that side. I can even, look, stand up, look. It comes with me. Huh? I did that for you. Did that for you guys. So subscribe and enjoy the show visually as well as.
He's so excited about this.
I
So
do love
excited.
it. You should get one. You work for Apple. They should give you this. Sorry, Tim. Right. Let's move on. Dos es cero. Everyone's been talking about that. You look. There's the Jamaica game, and then there's the Mexico game. Since we were last together, the Jamaica game. I'll say this. I mentioned this on the football show on the day afterwards. I really enjoyed it because I don't care if America win or lose, and I really enjoyed it. And I watched these two games in full because we were going to talk about them on the shows, and it wasn't easy to get. All right, so I worked very hard to watch these games. But I really enjoyed the kind of chugging nature, the desperation of the Jamaica game. And then it would have been funny if you'd have lost, to me, not to you, but to me, and a good story, gives us good content for the next day. That's really all I want. But then there's that crap own goal in the 96th minute to level it up, and they go on to win an extra time. Brilliant entertainment. I really had a lot of fun watching the game. And the Mexico game is different because the US actually played really well, and the Tyler Adams goal is terrific. So in the macro of the two games, the semi and the final, another Nations League victory for the USA, domination of CONCACAF. Tell us a little bit about your reaction to both games, Dunny.
Yeah, let's start with Jamaica. The game itself obviously changes. It gets just dropped on its head with that early goal. And I saw a lot of people talking about Joe Scally and not tracking a run. Scally and Tim Weah both kind of lose their marks. And if as an outside back, you have to be responsible for what's coming off your shoulder. But when that run makes an internal run, then you've got to think about stepping, because you could see if you go back to the screenshot or the buildup of the play, you'll see that the initial pressure on the balls needs to be a little bit better, obviously. But there's a staggered effect that's happening defensively where Scally still needs to somewhat be responsible for the run that's going internal. The outside back makes the run or the wide player makes the run. It's kind of passed from Tim Weah, but at that point, it's up and over Scally's head, tap it or header at the back post, whatever. Game changes. And the unfortunate part, what everyone was saying for Jamaica, well, oh my God, look at Leon Bailey, look at Mikel Antonio, look at all these players that have pulled out. This game would have been so much different. Yeah, the reality is that when you score a goal, you can sit back and then just hit transition. And so I think Jamaica did a very good job of playing the game within the game, which was they got the early goal, they sit back, be incredibly difficult to break down, be tough tackling, and made it extraordinarily difficult for the United States to break down low block defending, which is the continued evolution of this team, especially in CONCACAF games against teams that they're supposed to win with style and substance and identity and scoring goals at a good clip. If the game's 0-0 at halftime, it's different. If the game's 0-0 in the 70th minute, it's different. But the fact that Jamaica had the lead changes everything. So getting that goal, it's fortunate, it's lucky, it's ideal timing. It's unfortunate for Corey Burke. The deflection comes off his face. And once that goal happens, everything changes, right? The game's completely different. The game within the game is no longer the game within the game. And then it's just two teams playing each other straight up. And then you see the difference. What concerned me about it at the moment was watching, not with reckless abandon, but trying to figure out solutions with the substitution patterns where things just became kind of wide open. The chances that were taken by the product of giving up and conceding that early goal, Greg Berhalter kind of threw his game model out the window in a lot of ways to try to get his most effective players on the field that at the time were struggling against this 5-4-1-ish type defensive structure that Jamaica was playing. So they get past, it's Mexico. Mexico cruises past Panama. And here we go. Here's the rivalry.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed with regards to the rivalry. From the moment that I stepped foot inside either the Rose Bowl or the Coliseum, being a young man in Southern California, growing up watching US-Mexico, there's nothing that has changed. These players off the field can be friends. They can be teammates. They can be, they can go out and hang out, have a great time. But once the jerseys go on, you're playing for pride. You're playing for culture. You're playing for identity. You're playing for this. And I can tell you because I've been a part of it. There's something that is extraordinary that happens that as a US player, I recognized very, very early. This was not just about the game. This was me stepping into a territory that wasn't supposed to be mine. And I experienced it in England and Scotland, and I experienced it in Germany,
Mm.
of being an American and being the guy that's like, okay, yeah, you got good mentality, you guys compete, but like baseball, football, basketball, like that's your sport. This is our sport. This is something that I watched. I watched before I became on the level that could play for the under 20s, the under 23s, playing against Liga MX teams, all of this. It's a really odd situation, and it's an odd feeling to step onto a field and play a game which you're supposed to be the home team and recognize that the fans inside the stadium are rooting against you, are
Yeah.
actively rooting against you. And it's something that US soccer has really tried. And that's why I think to overcome when you talk about Columbus, Ohio, or you talk about Cincinnati, or you talk about more of the cold weather games to try to take some type of advantage back to the US. But what people don't, I think, always understand is there's a cultural element to this. And it is the fact that when you're talking about Mexico, United States, you talk about the history, you talk about the culture, you talk about the identity, you talk about the understanding of from the moment that these athletes were born, that they were born to a soccer culture and a soccer culture only, and a soccer household. And that familial chain of events that happens, whether grandparents supporting Chivas, that means you still support Chivas. Whether it's grandparents supporting Pumas, that means you support Pumas. You grow up, it's similar to what you grew up in the culture of England with supporting West Ham. But then there's been a shift and the power shift of and this is what the MLS and this is what MLS and Liga MX with Leagues Cup, with CONCACAF Champions Cup, with CONCACAF Campeones Cup, all of these, you're creating these organic rivalries at the domestic level. But man, oh man, when you talk about Mexico, US at the full international level, it's opportunity to represent Mexico, the opportunity to represent the United States. It's the opportunity for bragging rights. It's the opportunity not just for the players, but it's the opportunity for bragging rights for the country. And with everything that's transpired in North America over the last decade, it
Mm.
becomes that much more the fury and the fire and the passion, which has always been there, but
Yeah.
becomes kind of generated at an even higher level. But now what's happened, there's such a dominance on the US side. It's something that I I I honestly I struggle to wrap my head around how dominant this cycle has become for this group of players. And there's always a transitionary period, right?
Mm.
And we saw that obviously coming in to qualifying for the 2018 World Cup. When you think about Tim Howard, you think about Carlos Bocanegra, you think about Clint Dempsey, you think about Landon Donovan, you think about Michael Bradley, you think about Jermaine Jones, you think about those type of players. And how does that glass ceiling of talent maybe push down the development of that next generation of player? I think a similar thing has happened and been happening in Mexico because there was a moment when Edson Alvarez looked around and I think he realized he didn't have Hector Herrera, Ache. He didn't have Andres Guardado. He didn't have Miguel Layun. He didn't have anyone to kind of like go to battle with, to
Mm.
like get stuck in and kind of the dark arts, wind things up, make the game within the game a little bit spicier. Try to upset or make the playing field a little more uneven in favor of Mexico. I remember saying to my boys as we were watching the game, it felt like a mausoleum inside Dallas, that stadium,
Mm.
because usually the passion and the fire and the intensity from that crowd in support of Mexico is something that the US has to try to overcome. They didn't have to try to overcome it. It was almost like this was the first time in which I felt like no matter what, the United States had an advantage by just standing inside of the tunnel, that the crowd was there to support Mexico, but it was almost as if the crowd knew that there was a really good chance that Mexico wasn't going to win based on what had happened at the last couple of Nations League finals. When the United States has their quote unquote first team, when they have this group of players that is predominantly playing in Europe, that has played and or developed through Major League Soccer, um, it's the first time that I've felt like this was a Mexican team that didn't feel like psychologically going into the game that they had a chance to win. And
Mm.
that to me was mind-boggling. Mind-boggling to watch from the opening minute, that the level of intensity and the level of just tactical acumen was kind of, it was pushed by the United States. It wasn't pushed by Mexico. And it was the first time that I felt like from the opening whistle that there was not a single chance that the United States was going to lose this game. That
Mm.
Mexico was going to, we talk about being on the front foot, being on the back foot. It was as if Mexico had to defend for their lives in that first half to make sure that they didn't concede a goal. And that is, I think, an evolutionary credit to what Greg Berhalter and this group of players is continuing to evolve in. And I remember us coming out of the World Cup and saying, you asked me, okay, what's next? Getting out of the group, great, but you got stomped by the Netherlands.
Mm.
My hope was the building blocks on the backside of coming out of the World Cup was obviously you win your regional tournaments, but the continued evolution of the style, the substance, and the identity of the way that this United States team plays. And even with some question marks, even with some players not being in the best of form, even with some players struggle to find, their the right clubs, the right fitness, the right opportunity, the right amount of game time. There's just something that happens with this group of players that I don't know how to speak to properly. That when they get together, they look around and they say, "F it, man. Sorry, Tim. Let's go. Like, we're together. It doesn't matter how many minutes we've played. It doesn't matter what's going on. Everything else is bull. Sorry, Tim. This is us. Let's go out. We know what to do." And I think that's the biggest credit I can give to this group is they know who they are. And despite the noise, despite the predictions, despite anything that's happening in their individual kind of domestic footballing campaigns, there's something special that has happened within this group that when they are together, Tom,
Yeah.
they know they can figure out how to turn it on to get the results that are necessary. Even when they're not necessarily playing well, they're figuring things out. And I think that's a compliment to a team that has to figure out a way to continue these implemental development moments heading into the 2026 World Cup.
Which I think is accentuated that point in that final 20 minutes against Jamaica when it was chasing a goal, when it was throwing everything forward, but there was a belief they were going to get back in that game, even though it came from an own goal from a last minute corner. You got to force that corner, you got to force that play, you got to try and make it to happen. So I do think that's a really good point. But I wanted to ask you about American sports fans watching this, right?
Hmm.
And the reason I want to ask you, off the back of the point you made there about the World Cup when we spoke about that, this is the only sport in the world where America actually really competes with the world. All the other American
Yeah.
sports, they win it in America and
World
declare
champion.
themselves
Yeah.
world champions. Exactly. There was the athlete recently who spoke about that, world champions of what? Forgive me, I can't remember his name. I think he was the 400-meter runner. But I think it's really, really interesting that I speak to a lot of American fans on Sirius XM. You speak to them on the station, but also doing your TV broadcast and on your burner accounts on social media and in person as well, of course. And I wonder how difficult it is if the World Cup comes around in 2 years and the US make the quarterfinal, it will be a really good achievement. If they make the semi-final, it will be a meteoric achievement. If they made the final, it would be a stratospheric achievement. And if they won the thing, I can't see this happen in any way, right? But if it did happen, it would be the greatest upset, to my mind, in the history of international football, right? And that isn't to disrespect the American team. It's that, England don't win it, and we created this bloody game, and we don't win it, right? So it's unbelievably hard to win this competition. And I wonder when you're speaking to fans and when you're speaking to new people that are getting into football and seeing it for the first time, they watch the CONCACAF Nations League final because it's a big game, or they watch the World Cup, but really they're basketball first and NFL second or whatever. Some of your weird college sports third, then football fourth. And then some of the other people are big soccer people like we are. How difficult is it to say, no, actually, we're not going to win the World Cup? And they're like, oh, So what's the point then? And you're like, well, it's the growth of a team, and winning the
Yeah.
Nations League is actually pretty good. And if we can compete in the World Cup when we play Brazil in the quarterfinals and hold them to a penalty shootout or whatever, that's a massive achievement for us. How difficult is that culturally to kind of explain? How understood is that? And how much does winning this trophy and having a Nations League and having these moments make that a little bit easier? Because no, we're going to win this. And then in the big, big one, we're going there to compete. And these are the rungs that are going to be good for us.
This has been something that I've dealt with my entire playing career. It's something I can go all the way back to junior high and high school with. We always used to joke about you had to be the quarterback or the point guard to hook up with the cheerleader, right? Or the prom queen. There's it is the inevitable end point conversation that comes along with U.S. sports fans that, oh, I don't understand the offside rule. What is offsides? What is offsides? Oh, I just don't understand the game. All of that stuff. I have had these conversations years upon years upon years upon years. And I've gotten to the point where it's not worth trying to waste my time verbalizing why I think this team is in a good place or why I think this team is continuing to accelerate their development. Because the reality is, you're not going to convince people that don't want to be convinced. Now, is it a challenge in terms of branding? I would say it's more of a challenge for US soccer and for its television partners to brand superstars in a way that it is identifiable for a common fan to walk the streets of New York and look up and see, oh, Christian Pulisic, Puma, or oh, Weston McKennie, Nike, or oh, Tyler Adams or whoever. You know what I mean? I feel like that's more of like a commercial branding aspect of the repetitiveness of seeing these guys, you wearing the U.S. men's national, and then walking that fine line of, well, why don't they play in the U.S. to your point? Because all of the best teams are in the world in the world sports are in the United States. So it's something that's difficult, very difficult to verbalize. But what I would say is I think you're seeing more converts to soccer based on Premier League and leagues around the world that are actually stumbling upon and or choosing to be a part of, I don't know, explorative, viewing of football and or soccer and then saying, okay, well, I like Arsenal. I like this. I like this Mikel Arteta guy. Okay, so what about our US guys? And then kind of stumbling along in that. I think obviously with social media, the shareable energy of what, the US soccer fan is, good or bad, is a part of what the narrative is continuing to be. But I would agree with you. I think it's one of the most difficult things to verbalize in a landscape of so many different sports. And now going for all of these different pay to watch platforms, it's not as easy as kind of the stumble upon or coming off the backside. Because, remember here in the United States, we would backside an NBC Sports, an MLS game on watching a Premier League game or an ESPN MLS game off the backside of the Euros or a World Cup game, an MLS game off the backside of a World Cup game for Fox. All of these things were really positive, but the biggest equivalent I can say for U.S. sport fans is that the World Cup generates a similar power that the Olympics generate. But what's going to be different is the eyeballs that are going to be on 2026 being in the United States. That power, if it's being a part, 1994, I was 17 years old, seeing that kind of power and that awe. 2026 is the landscape is going to be dominated with soccer. It's going to be dominated with pressure. It's going to be dominated with hope and this ideology of what the United States team could potentially be at that point of time. So I think the momentum will be there at that point in terms of fan interest, but it is up to the challenge. And I think it's something that Greg Berhalter, having been a part of the coverage for TNT around the U.S. men's national team, and I'll be a part of that coverage in Maryland against Colombia and in Orlando for Brazil ahead of the Copa America this summer. I can tell you that what this group is trying to do in terms of preparation and in terms of recognizing they can be iconic heroes for the rest of their life. Every single player understands what that momentum needs to be heading into the 2026 World Cup. I know it's long-winded. I know it's really difficult to kind of put into words, but hopefully I tried my best, because it is a very, very, very difficult conversation. And it's something that a lot of people have thrown hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars at to try to brand, I think, the Americana soccer into this organism that people can try to get behind.
No, good answer. It's an interesting question, I think, and I love talking about
Yeah.
it because I just find the American sport landscape incredibly interesting, and it's so different to ours. And I always find it very difficult to understand a world where football is not the number one most played, most watched, most talked about thing. So I always find that quite interesting. Listen, I want to move us on. Before we do, though, just one final thing on the game. I wanted to get your view on Tyler Adams, because we've spoken about Tyler Adams before. And he's been missing for such a long time. I know you're a massive fan. Didn't work out for him in the Premier League at his previous club. Hasn't worked out in the Premier League for him at this club, because he turned up at Bournemouth and got immediately injured. Came back, got injured again. And I thought it was quite interesting that, Gio Reyna has starred at this tournament, but he has obviously gone. And I'm happy to. You can obviously knock this down, but I think he's gone to the wrong club in Nottingham Forest at the wrong time with the wrong manager, and that's not going to work out for him. I do sort of think with Tyler Adams at Bournemouth in this next 10 games or so for the Cherries, and I think he'll probably play, we start 6 and come off the bench in 4 or something like that, depending on how fit he is. Carefree, football playing manager, alongside Alex Scott in midfield. That pairing looks really, really good. And the goal is obviously fantastic. I didn't get the measurement in the end, how far he was out. Maybe looks like 36, 37 yards. Tell us a bit about where Tyler Adams is now in his development and what the next 6 months should hold for him.
I am really bullish about 3 players in particular on this U.S. men's national team. And I'll end with Tyler. I've been bullish on Gio for a long, long time. You know this. I've been up your, as you said earlier. I think that's a sorry, Tim, about how good Gio is, because Gio is unlike any other player for the U.S. men's national team. And I don't know what's going on with Terzic at Borussia Dortmund. I certainly can't wrap my head around what happened with Nuno Espirito Santo at Nottingham Forest. But to see Gio do what he does, kid's a fucking rock star. He's fucking incredible. Sorry, Tim. Sorry, Tim. I every single time Tony Meola and I are on counterattack and Gio doesn't play and we come on Mondays, I'm at a loss for words, because I just can't understand why, when he performs like this for the US, and he did it against Germany and he did it against Ghana in the fall, why this kid isn't playing more significant minutes. Because give him the keys to the Ferrari and let the man punch the pedal. Weston, monster mentality. I know you're not a huge fan. I know things went terribly wrong at Leeds. I know he was basically transfer listed at Juve in the summer, but the kid is undroppable for Allegri. His performances are outrageous, and he is such a vital part of what happens for the U.S. men's national team in that midfield. Tyler, I would challenge anybody to go back and look at the downfall of Leeds United and coincide that with the injury of Tyler. I think that injury for Tyler Adams at Leeds United played such a bigger role than people want to give it credit for the relegation situation that they found themselves in. Because if you watch Tyler, his fuck you mentality, sorry, Tim, is so extraordinarily high. His competitive nature of I don't give a fuck, sorry, Tim, of how he steps on the field. I'm going to eat you alive. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to compete. I'm going to run it up your tailpipe every single time. He is such a vital, vital focal point. And as this team has success, as it did at Qatar, as it did in this tournament, Tyler plays a massive role, because he plays that number 6 role unlike anybody else in that group. All due respect to Johnny and Eunice and Weston and anyone else that tries to freestyle in that position. There's nobody like Tyler. What does that mean for Bournemouth? He is going to, as long as he can stay healthy. And I love his mentality. I love how fucking pissed he was. Sorry, Tim, in both the Jamaica game and against Mexico, trying to curtail his minutes to make sure he doesn't threshold this into the injury area. He has a monster mentality, and you need those type of guys. He is the type of guy that you hate playing against, but you couldn't imagine not playing alongside because he's the guy that wants to go to battle. He's not afraid of anything. And I've told this story here on Week in the Tackle. Tony Miola and I interviewed him after the All-Star game down in Atlanta against Juve. Kid was a teenager. He's like 16, 17 years old. He comes off the field battling against Emre Can in the Juve midfield. And I was like, how is it? He's like, yeah, man, good game. Feel good about it. Blah, blah. I was like, dude, it's Juve. And he goes, I don't really care. I was like, what? 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 You're like a teenager and you just played Juventus at the All-Star game and like you don't care, like it's not a big deal. And he goes, they're just dudes in a t-shirt. Like I'm totally fine with it. And that's when I realized this kid, his brain was different than other kids. That's when I knew that there was a chance that this kid was going to play at a really high level. Now, it's taking kind of weird turns from RB Leipzig to Leeds and now to Bournemouth. But yeah, these are three players I'm incredibly bullish on. I just think that, and by the way, this is the best part when you add this Christian Pulisic conversation in, because I think Christian's in the best run of his career and doing things at such full speed it's just insane to see how he's moving with his agility, his technical ability. I remember Tony Miola said to me, when it comes to 2026, we'll be in an unbelievable place if Christian isn't the best player on the team. I agree with him. I agree with him because what that means is Tyler's in the team. That means Weston's in the team. That means Gio's in the team. That means Tim Weah's in the team. That means Christian's in the team. And all of a sudden, these guys are just cooking because they make each other better. And it goes back to the analogy I had a long time ago. The United States was never built on one individual player. The United States is always built on this core collective of players that play at such an incredibly high level. Because when you go back, Alexi Lawless had Marcelo Balboa, John Harkes had Tab Ramos, Ernie Stewart had Eric Winalda. When you go into that next generation of player, Landon Donovan had Clint Dempsey, Michael Bradley had Jermaine Jones, Carlos Bocanegra had Aguchi Onyewu. All of these players made the players around them better. And I think that's what's exciting. And by the way, side note, and I know you didn't watch the game, but I did. The fact that the Olympic team, the under 23s, tied 2-2 in France against Thierry Henry's under 23 team. There's some really good players in that group as well that I think have a really high ceiling of breaking into what this core collective looks like. This could be, when we get to 2026, collectively, the most competitive U.S. men's national team roster that we've ever put together. And I mean that with the utmost respect to what we've seen in the past, because this generation is their growth of what we're seeing with this individual group right now for Greg Berhalter, and then what the under 23s and the under 20s have been building. Yeah, really, really excited as a U.S. men's national team fan to see what the potential is for this group.
And after that amazing hype, we can all look forward to that inevitable quarterfinal elimination against Brazil or Argentina or whoever it is in 2026. We look forward to it. Listen, just time for heroes and villains from the last week. We thought we'd do one each moving forward because I had far too many heroes and villains, and we thought Dunny could do some work for this program. And I'll start with my hero for this week because, as you know, Dunny, and our listeners and viewers will know, I have no time for the March international break. I do if the games are competitive, like, the Nations League stuff or the qualifiers. And we're recording before the game between Wales and Poland, which is tonight as we record. That's going to be really good. The winners in the European Championship. I think that's really interesting. Win the game and you're through, lose the game and you don't go. So great. I've got lots of time for that, and that's really important. I don't have time for England against Brazil. I don't have time for England against Belgium. Kyle Walker getting injured against Brazil means we might not get him for Man City, Real Madrid, which, what's the point of the whole thing if we're not going to see Vinny against Walker, right? So ridiculous. And I made the point last week. These guys have worked 8 months of a 10-month season to get to this point. And if you're in April and May and the season is still live, big things could be on the horizon for you. You don't want to get injured in a friendly against Brazil. And that's why, Bukayo Saka's got a groin strain and whatever.
Wait, so
right?
is this your villain? Did you just do your villain?
So no, it's a long-winded one. Oh, sorry, are you accusing someone else of being fucking long-winded?
No. I know. I was just trying to make sure. Is this your villain or is this
I'm
your
getting
hero?
there. I'm
Okay.
getting there. I'm getting. It's my hero. Sorry,
Okay.
Tim, by the way, for that. But one positive comes out of this terrible international break, and that is a focus in England, at least, on the sub-championship leagues. And we've called it various things over the years. So it's support your local club day, or it's National League Day, or whatever. They've had different focuses. Women's Super League have had some great attendances during international break. So there's different focuses during this thing. Anyway, because it's been this period where it's been focused on your local club, I got to see the highlights of Northampton Town this weekend, which I probably wouldn't have watched. Now, why is this really interesting? Well, Northampton Town were up against Derby County. This is a League One matchup, and there's an amazing thing that happens in this matchup. I love mascots. I think they're fantastic.
Yeah.
I love the fact clubs have them. I love the fact that they're often just bizarre, like West Bromwich Albion have a mascot, which is basically a boiler because they're sponsored by an electric goods company. It's fucking wild. Sorry, Tim. Well, in the game between Northampton and Derby, Nathaniel Mendez-Lang goes over to take a corner for Derby County. The mascot for Northampton is Clarence the Dragon. Why a dragon has got anything to do with Northampton, I don't know. They're very famous, Northampton, as a city for making shoes. It's why they're called the Cobblers. They've been making shoes in Northampton for a few hundred years. Church's shoes, I think, which is a real high-end shoe brand, come from Northampton. I have a pair of Church's shoes I wear for weddings and such. And a lot of bloody money. Anyway, Nathaniel Mendez-Lang goes over to take this corner, and Clarence the Dragon's over there giving it, Timmy tough nuts. Go on, mate, take this corner, you prick. And he has the ball in his hands. And when the player comes over, Mendez-Lang to take the ball, sort of throws it on the ground. Mendez-Lang does like a brush of his fingers across the Dragon's chest, and the Dragon jumps to the ground, pretends to be injured, is waving at the bench, and does a couple of rolls. And he's like, medic, medic, on the ground. But because he's the mascot and obviously kind of taking the piss, nobody cares. And so the game goes on, and Nathaniel Mendez-Lang has to take a corner in front of a dragon in a Northampton Town kit, rolling on the ground like Neymar, pretending to be injured. And without these terrible, terrible friendlies, I would not have seen this. So, Dunny, my hero of the week is Clarence the Dragon. I
love this. I got to find that online. I guess we're going to call it a little breaking news, because last night, as I was laying in bed, Pablo Maurer, who I guess never sleeps, from The Athletic, announced that the MLS and the PSRA, Professional Soccer Referees Association, have come to an agreement for the collective bargaining, or I guess the collective bargaining agreement, have come to an agreement on the collective bargaining agreement for this is going to be till 2030, according to The Athletic. 93 of 97 voted, 72% said yes, 77.4% was the final tally. Now, what makes this a little bit interesting is it actually goes through 2 World Cup cycles. So usually you get through 1 World Cup cycle, then you renegotiate, which I'm a bit surprised that they didn't try to align it with MLS's CBA, but that's a conversation for another day. This is what I love about this, okay? And no disrespect to the referees that have been refereeing Major League Soccer over the past couple of weeks. I think they did a great job for what they were asked to do. But now we're going to see the elite level referees back in working in Major League Soccer. Here are the increases for these referees. A 68% increase is what we're looking at. So probationary, which are new referees, are going to be up to 95,000. If you've done 200 plus matches in Major League Soccer, your base salary will be 142,000. If you've been over 301 matches, your base salary will be $165,000. Now, when we talk about raises, center referees will be between 32 and 53% on their raise. ARs will be 87 to 113% for their referees raises. Now they'll get a match fee, so they'll have their base salary and they'll get their match fees. Match fees for a referee, $1,500, so $1,500 per game. That'll be for the referee and for the ARs. VAR is going to get $1,100. AVAR $550. And then decision day and playoffs, these referees will get first class treatment for their flights. So I just
Good.
thought it was great that everybody finally settled down, came to an agreement. We get the referees back. They are well paid. I think it's great that they're getting the money that maybe they're not necessarily fully asking for, but they had come to an agreement. Cooler heads prevailed. And by the way, I mean, 95,000 base salary, 142,000 for 200 games base salary, 300 games, 165,000 base salary with match fees for all of these referees. Pretty good clip considering as a player, yeah, that these guys would be making more money than I made when I retired back in 2006.
No, I think it's fantastic. I mean, I'm hearing about it for the first time
Continued
now to
growth.
describe it, but I do think it's fantastic. And I say this about English football quite a lot. The Premier League referees should be paid a fortune. They should be paid as much as, if not the median rate of the Premier League, which I pitched previously, which is about 50 or 60 grand a week. They should be paid a lot of money because they take a lot of grief and a lot of abuse and a very high profile. And it would attract the very best talent. It might attract a different type of person. There might be a different way of getting referees fast-tracked into roles. And also, you know, these are household names. We shouldn't know who Mike Dean and Mark Clattenburg are. But we do because they referee Erling Haaland, Kevin De Bruyne, and Bukayo Saka. And because of that, their decisions and their opinions matter a lot. And for that kind of pressure, they should be paid a ton of money. Sorry, Tim. So I always think that's, even if I don't like these referees, some of them, I do think that the job is so high pressured and so high profile, they should be paid as such. We're a little bit over, but we will do briefly villain of the week, and I'll just do mine. We'll do it in more detail later. Nottingham Forest are my villain, and the reason for it is they have decided to appeal against the 4-point deduction for breaching the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules. I won't break it down in great detail. We've done it previously. Most of our listeners will know this. But part of them getting only a 4-point deduction was them being compliant with the Premier League and with the independent investigation, and they didn't essentially lay out a bunch of grievances about it. They worked with the Premier League. They admitted to wrongdoing. They tried to give their mitigation, which was the whole Brennan Johnson thing. We sell him later to make more money. That's why we're not going to be at the right level of debt and all that sort of stuff. They worked with them. They got a pretty soft points deduction. Even though the Premier League pushed for 8, they got 4. To then appeal what seems like a pretty fair deduction, being as they did it and have admitted to doing it, and there's proof that they done it, to get a 4-point deduction, they got the right punishment. This is not going to be taken down to 2 or 1. They're going to have 4, and it might get worse for them. And it's the arrogance of football owners that have seen them do this when cooler heads would have gone, Christ, we got away with that, didn't we? And they'd have accepted it, known where they stand, and given us some certainty in the relegation race, and them as well, which they're now not going to get till postseason. So for me, that's a villainous move.
Yeah, my villain is just the chant that we heard down in Dallas. My appeal is to the decision makers, to the smarter people in the room. We've got to figure out something else. We've got to figure out a way to the elimination of the chant is not working. The idea of punishing the players on the field and stopping the game in moments in which the chant is being loudly displayed inside the stadium. I've been a part of these broadcasts. We've got to figure out something different. The deterrent is not strong enough as it is right now for the situation to be what it is, where the players are being asked to step into the middle of the field. The referee is asked to blow the whistle and stop the game for up to 5 minutes. We saw it on 2 different occasions, both after I think around the 90th minute and after the 95th minute, 90th plus 5. If you are choosing to go down this path where you are trying to eliminate this, then we must have stronger sanctions, because we are just dancing around in the same old circle. And this is something that we've looked at for the past 3 or 4 years. And has it worked? I think it's worked to a certain extent. But if we are going to be in a situation where the only way that we can stop this, or we think we can stop this from happening, is stopping the game. I think there's got to be smarter people in the room that come up with more creative outlets for situations like these. And whether that means stopping teams from playing at all in certain stadiums, stopping teams from playing in the United States, stopping games from happening, redistribution, the fines, the penalties, whatever this looks like. If we're going down this path, we've got to be more creative, because what we saw the other night isn't doing nearly enough to stop that situation from that happening.
Dunny, thank you for coming to the show today. I know you've enjoyed the painkillers and you're about to get super snoozy on some NyQuil. So thank you for doing the program today. Good to see you looking so well. And a quick thank you as well to the reviews we got this week. We asked for some reviews last week, and there was one I just wanted to read to you because I love this from WW Girl, who said, Tom Rennie was a favorite of mine on Grumpy Pundits, and I enjoyed him even more during his interactions with Brian Dunseth. Now they're on separate shows on SiriusXM FC. This is my way to get my Rennie Dunny fix. If you like honest, if a bit cranky, views on the world of football, don't miss the podcast, Week in the Tackle. I love that review. Thank you for
Good
posting.
one.
That was on Apple Podcasts. Please leave some reviews, leave some 5-star reviews. Tell your friends as well to subscribe to Week in the Tackle, which is available as a podcast. You can also watch the program on both YouTube and Spotify. Tim Horsey produced the program. Sorry, Tim. We'll see you next time.